Today, I have a story that begins with a young man who thought he was just escaping his past, but ended up walking straight into something much bigger. He said, "I'm too young for you." And she, strong-wise and unshakably calm, just smiled and replied, "That's exactly why I like you." What followed wasn't some fairy tale, it was raw, real, and more honest than most love stories dare to be. This isn't just about age, it's about healing, it's about second chances. And it might just make you believe in the quiet kind of love, the kind that doesn't shout, but stays. Hey, I'm Eli Walker. I'm 23, and I just moved out on my own for the first time. No roommates, no family, just me, a beat-up old house I found on a rental site, and a 6-month lease I could barely afford. I grew up in a crowded home with 3 siblings and 2 parents who always meant well, but never really listened. They were the kind of people who told me how to live my life before I even had a chance to figure it out myself. "You should go into trades. It's safer. Don't waste money on that idea. It'll never work. You're too young to know what you want." Maybe they were right about some things, but I needed space. I needed a chance to fail or succeed on my own terms. So I worked my ass off for almost a year. Odd jobs, deliveries, construction gigs, whatever I could find. I saved every dollar I could. And eventually I found this listing, a small, older house about 40 minutes outside the city. It wasn't pretty. Paint peeling, weird smell in the hallway, kitchen cabinets hanging on for dear life. But it was mine. Well, for 6 months at least. And for the first time in my life, I could close the door behind me and not hear anyone yelling from the next room. The first week was chaos. No Wi-Fi for the first 3 days. Half the outlets didn't work. I had to kill a spider the size of my hand in the bathtub, but I was free, and that made everything worth it. I'd fall asleep on an old mattress on the floor surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked yet, and still feel more at peace than I ever had in my childhood bedroom. I didn't know anyone in the neighborhood. At first, I didn't care. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my life. I had ideas. I wanted to start something on my own, maybe a business, but I didn't know where to start. I had no degree, no connections, and no safety net. Just the stubborn belief that I could build something if I just had the space to try. And then a few days after I moved in, I met her. I was outside trying to fix a broken fence panel with a hammer that was definitely too small for the job. I must have looked like a complete idiot. That's when she walked up. "Need a real tool?" she asked, holding out a power drill with a slight smirk. I looked up surprised. She was tall with soft eyes and shoulder-length brown hair. She looked like someone who had her life together, confident, calm. "Yeah," I laughed. "This thing isn't cutting it." "I'm Naomi Brooks," she said, handing me the drill. "I live next door, just saw you struggling from my window." I thanked her and we chatted a bit. She was 39, divorced, and had a 10-year-old son named Micah. Her ex Derek Miles left when she got pregnant. She didn't talk about him much, and I didn't ask, but she made it clear she'd done everything on her own. Worked 2 jobs at first, slept in her car for a while when things got really bad. Now she ran a small online store and was finally in a stable place. I don't know what it was, but talking to her felt easy. She didn't talk down to me. She didn't try to tell me what I should do with my life. She just listened genuinely. And when she talked about her own struggles, it didn't sound like she was complaining. It sounded like she was proud of what she survived. Over the next couple of weeks, we kept running into each other. She'd knock on my door and bring me leftovers. I'd help her carry groceries. Micah would come over and ask me if I had any cool video games. I started to look forward to seeing them. I didn't have anyone else out here, and being around them felt good. I remember sitting on my porch one night drinking coffee from a chipped mug, watching the sun go down over the trees. Naomi came over and sat next to me. Didn't say a word at first, just sat there. Then she said, "You remind me a little of me." When I started over, I didn't know how to respond to that. I wasn't sure if she meant it as a compliment or a warning. "I don't really know what I'm doing," I admitted. She smiled. Nobody does. That night, I thought about how different my life had already become. 2 weeks ago, I was a guy sleeping on a friend's couch, wondering if I'd ever feel like an adult. Now I had a house, a neighbor who believed in me more than Richard and Elaine Walker ever had. And maybe, just maybe, a new beginning. It was a Saturday morning when Naomi knocked on my door holding 2 mugs of coffee. No text, no warning, just a gentle knock in her voice saying, "I hope you're not one of those people who can't function without caffeine." I wasn't, but I let her in anyway. She sat at the small kitchen table across from me, looked around at the half-finished mess I called a house and said, "You know, it already looks better than it did when the last guy lived here." That was her way of saying she approved. We talked for almost 2 hours that morning. She asked about my family and I gave her the short version. Strict parents, lots of rules, never felt like I could breathe. She nodded like she understood. Then she told me her story and, I mean, really told me. No sugarcoating. She got pregnant at 28. Her boyfriend at the time, Micah's father, Derek, panicked, said he wasn't ready, and just like that, he was gone. She had no savings, no plan, and no one to fall back on. Her parents had died years before, and her only sibling lived across the country. She worked nights as a waitress while pregnant, then cleaned houses during the day after Micah was born. She lost her apartment when Micah was 6 months old and lived in her car for 4 weeks. "For weeks with a baby and nowhere to go," she said. We'd sit in the back seat, wrapped in blankets, waiting for it to be light enough so I could bring him inside to warm up without people staring. I couldn't say anything. I just listened. Eventually, someone offered her a job managing online orders for a local boutique, and from there she learned the ropes of e-commerce. Eventually, someone offered Naomi a job managing online orders for a local boutique, and from there she learned the ropes of e-commerce bit by bit, order by order, night by night. A year later, she launched her own small online shop, handmade candles, curated home goods, little details that spoke volumes. It didn't blow up. It didn't need to. It was steady. It was hers. As I listened to her, something shifted in me. I had come out here thinking I was doing something bold, leaving home, trying to build a life from scratch. But Naomi had done all that with a child in her arms and no safety net beneath her. She hadn't just survived, she had created a world where her son could thrive. After that morning, we started talking more. Not every day, but often enough to blur the line between neighbor and something more. We'd chat over groceries, wave from across the driveway, trade leftovers like it was some kind of ritual. Micah kept coming by asking me to help with his bike or quizzing me on random Pokemon names I hadn't heard since middle school. I started to feel like I was part of something. Not just crashing in a temporary space, but belonging. Then came the night we sat on her porch under the soft hum of summer bugs and porch light shadows. Micah had gone to bed, the house was quiet, and Naomi looked over at me like she could see right through the version of myself I was still trying to believe in. "I don't usually let people in," she said. "In your house?" I asked. "In my life," she answered, her voice a little slower, a little softer. "But you, I don't know. You're easy to be around." I wasn't ready for how much that meant. I could have joked. I could have deflected. But instead I said, "You're kind of amazing." You know that she gave me that half smile of hers. Part appreciation, part disbelief. Took me a long time to believe that. I hesitated, then said the thing that had been crawling under my skin for weeks. "I'm too young for you." It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession. She looked at me, really looked, and then she smiled. Not out of politeness or pity, but something deeper. "That's exactly why I like you." I didn't have a response. Not then. Because that single sentence cracked something open in me, something I didn't know I'd been guarding. And for the first time in years, I stopped questioning if I was enough. I just sat there. Let it sink in. That night, after I got home, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Naomi's words circling in my head like a slow, steady echo. "That's exactly why I like you." It was simple, honest, and terrifying. Because now I had to ask myself, what do I do with that? This wasn't just about flirtation anymore. This wasn't some summer distraction. I liked her more than I'd ever let myself admit. I liked her calm, her fire, her way of turning resilience into routine. I liked the way she made room for me without ever making me feel like I had to prove I deserved it. But I couldn't ignore the questions knocking louder each day. Was I ready for this? Could I truly be what she and Micah needed? What if I failed them? I didn't have the answers. And yet something inside me had already decided I wanted to try. The next morning, I woke up early. I made coffee. I burned toast again. I laughed at myself, then I sat at my kitchen table for over an hour staring at my phone, not texting her, not calling, just thinking. I thought about my dad, Richard Walker, and how he once told me love was a distraction from building something real. I thought about my mom, Elaine, always urging me to focus on what made sense. But here's the truth. This, whatever it was with Naomi, felt like the first thing that actually did make sense. Not because it was easy, but because it was honest. So I did something small, but real. I picked up the shelf I'd been working on in my garage, wiped the last bit of sawdust off it, and carried it next door. Naomi opened the door in her robe, hair messy, coffee mug in hand. She blinked at the sight of me holding the shelf awkwardly in both arms. "I made this for your entryway," I said, heart pounding. "For keys, mail, whatever. I wanted to build something that belonged in your space." She didn't say anything at first, just stepped aside and let me in. We installed it together. Quietly. Carefully. The moment felt heavier than the act itself. When we were done, she turned to me and asked, "Are you afraid I didn't pretend?" "Yeah." "But you're still here?" she said. "I want to be," I told her. She nodded slowly, then reached out and took my hand. "Then that's enough." In that moment, it wasn't about age, or labels, or what people would think. It was about choosing each other, not for what we had figured out, but for what we were willing to build together. A few evenings later, I was in the garage sanding a new piece, this one, a custom order Naomi had helped me line up. The sun had just dipped behind the tree line, and the air smelled faintly of sawdust, lemon oil, and the last bit of daylight. I didn't hear the door open, but I felt someone watching me. I turned. It was Micah standing there in his socks, holding a comic book in one hand and a juice pouch in the other. "Hey," I said, setting down the sander. "Need something?" He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the shelf I was working on, then at me. Finally, he said, "Do you want to look at my drawing?" I nodded. "Of course." He walked over and handed it to me. It was a superhero, all sharp lines and energy bolts, the words "The Fixer" scribbled across the top in bold marker. I smiled. "The Fixer? He sounds pretty cool." Micah shrugged. "He doesn't fly or punch stuff. He just shows up and helps people fix what's broken." I looked at him, something in my chest pulling tight. "I like him," I said quietly. "A lot." Micah shifted his weight, then added like it wasn't a big deal, "I based him on you, Eli. I mean, Dad." The air left my lungs. I blinked. "You don't have to say anything," Micah muttered, suddenly shy. "I just wanted you to know." I crouched down to his level, the drawing still in my hands, my throat tight. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, "except that means more to me than you can imagine." He smiled, awkward and proud. "Okay? Just don't mess up my drawing." I laughed, ruffled his hair, and pulled him into a quick, one-armed hug. He didn't pull away. That night when I told Naomi what he'd said, she didn't cry, but her eyes got glossy and she took my hand across the dinner table, squeezed it tight, and whispered, "He's never called anyone that before, not even his real father." And I realized this wasn't just something I was growing into, I was already there. It happened on a Sunday. The morning started like any other. Micah was outside kicking a soccer ball, Eli was in the garage working on a shelf for a neighbor's custom order, and Naomi was in the kitchen humming softly while slicing oranges. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and the hum in her throat died. I was nearby setting down a tape measure when I heard the silence. Not the normal kind, but the sharp kind. The kind that freezes everything. I walked in just as she was lowering the phone, her hand trembling slightly. "What's wrong?" I asked gently. She looked up at me, eyes distant, like she hadn't expected the past to reach this far. "It was him," she said. "Derek." She nodded. I hadn't heard her say his name aloud in months. "He sent a message, said he's coming into town next week, said he wants to see Micah." The room felt colder suddenly, like her voice had opened a door that had been bolted shut for years. I sat across from her and waited. She didn't speak right away. She just stared at the knife on the cutting board like it could hold the answer. I thought I was done being afraid of him, she said, her voice flat but full. But one text and suddenly I'm 28 again. Broke, alone, pregnant, begging someone who already decided to leave. I reached for her hand, and this time she didn't offer it gently. She grabbed mine like it was the only thing holding her steady. "I'm not scared for me," she added. "I'm scared for Micah. What if he wants to meet him? What if Micah wants that? And what if he leaves again?" She looked me dead in the eye then, and for the first time I saw the woman beneath the strength, the cracks beneath the calm. "Eli, I don't want to unravel." I squeezed her hand back firm, steady. "Then don't. Let me hold the thread for a while." She blinked fast, then let out a breath like she'd been holding it in for 10 years. "Do you think he deserves a chance?" she asked. "I think you deserve peace," I said. "Whatever that means, and I'll stand beside you no matter what you choose." And in that kitchen next to the oranges, and the silence, I saw Naomi not as the strong woman who had everything together, but as a human being who'd carried more than she should have had to for far too long. She leaned into me, and for once she didn't try to hold it all alone. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Derek showed up. Not with a warning, not with an apology, just a short text that said I'm nearby. And then a knock at the door 20 minutes later. Naomi opened it slowly. I stood behind her, just out of view, but close enough that she could feel my presence if she needed it. Micah was in the living room building a rocket from Legos. The TV played softly. He didn't know, but he would soon. Derek Miles stood on the porch in a pressed shirt and expensive shoes like the last 10 years hadn't happened, like he hadn't vanished. "Naomi," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You look good." She didn't smile. "You're early. I had time. Figured I'd stop by." "You figured wrong," she said, voice calm, but her fingers curled tightly around the doorknob. "Micah's inside." "I was hoping to say hi," Derek added casually. Too casually. "You don't get to hope for things you walked away from." He looked past her, trying to peer into the house. "How is he?" "He's incredible. And you don't know a single thing about him." Derek shifted his weight. "I want to change that." Naomi didn't answer right away. Her jaw was tense. Her eyes flicked to me briefly, then back to Derek. "Micah," she called gently, never looking away from the man in front of her. "Can you come here for a minute, sweetheart?" I wanted to stop her. To say, maybe this wasn't the time, but I also knew this was her choice to make, her story to reclaim. Micah padded into the hallway holding the rocket. "Yeah, Mom." His eyes landed on the stranger by the door. Naomi crouched beside him, steadying her voice. "This is someone from before. His name is Derek. He's your father." Micah blinked, then looked at her, then back at Derek. "Oh," he said, not excited, not angry, just observing. The one who left Derek flinched visibly. "I made some mistakes," he started, "but I want to be part of your life now." Micah tilted his head. Why, Derek seemed caught off guard. "Because I'm your dad." Micah held up the Lego rocket like a shield. "I already have someone." Naomi's hand slowly reached for his. Her lips trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. Pride. Micah turned and walked back toward the living room without another word. And Naomi stood up taller than I'd ever seen her. "You said everything you needed to say when you disappeared, Derek. He's not yours to try out. He's not some broken toy you forgot and remembered again. He's a whole person, and you missed your chance to know him." Derek's mouth opened, then closed. "I won't stop you from writing to him. One day if he wants it, it'll be on his terms. But today," her voice cracked just once, "you don't get to pretend you're a father." She stepped back and closed the door gently but firmly. And that was it. She turned to me, then her breath shaky, her shoulders finally sagging under years of tension. I wrapped my arms around her without a word. Micah peeked from the hallway, eyes wide. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. Naomi let out a long breath, wiped her eyes, and smiled the bravest smile I'd ever seen. "Yeah, baby. I am now." That evening the house was quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind of silence that follows an emotional storm. Naomi sat curled on the couch, legs tucked under her, her eyes distant though the TV flickered in front of her. Micah was in his room, door closed, likely pretending to play, while his mind replayed the afternoon. I watched them both from the kitchen, and I knew they needed something. Not a speech, not a lesson, just space to breathe again. So I went to work. In the backyard, I dragged out the old fire pit Naomi kept stored in the shed. I gathered kindling, stacked logs, and lit a flame. I laid out a blanket, grabbed marshmallows, graham crackers, and 2 Hershey's bars from a stash I'd been saving since Christmas. Then I knocked on Micah's door. "Hey," I said. "You want to burn sugar over fire with me?" He opened the door slowly. "You mean s'mores?" I grinned. "Best therapy I know." He glanced toward the living room. "Can Mom come too?" "That's the plan," I said. "Go grab her." 10 minutes later, the 3 of us sat beneath the stars, me tending the fire, Naomi wrapped in a cardigan, Micah roasting marshmallows with the kind of intense concentration only a 10-year-old can master. Nobody said anything heavy. Naomi laughed softly when Micah dropped a flaming marshmallow into the grass and yelled, "Battle casualty!" I teased her about how she burned her first one to a crisp and pretended it was extra flavor. Micah leaned his head on Naomi's shoulder between bites. At some point I handed her a graham cracker sandwich and murmured, "This won't fix everything." "I know," she said, "but it helps." I leaned back against the tree trunk, watching the orange glow dance in their eyes. "You built this, you know," I told her. She looked at me confused. This family, this space, the kind of love that doesn't need perfect pieces, it just needs people who stay. Naomi didn't say anything. She just reached for my hand across the blanket and squeezed. Micah yawned, curled up on her lap, and mumbled through a mouthful of chocolate, "This is better than a movie." And maybe it was, because healing doesn't always come with big moments or loud words. Sometimes it comes with firelight, sticky fingers, and knowing that after everything, we're still here, together. A week passed after the fire pit night. Life settled back into its familiar rhythm. Naomi worked on new candle scents for a holiday line. I was building a custom bookcase for a woman across town. Micah had a school project involving the solar system and had somehow convinced both of us to help him make all 8 planets out of foam balls and glitter. It was ordinary, comforting, and yet something inside me wouldn't stop whispering, "This isn't temporary anymore." So why keep treating it like it is? One evening, while Naomi was out dropping off a package and Micah was glued to his space documentary, I stood in the garage-turned-workshop, staring at a small block of walnut wood. And I just knew. I didn't want a ring from a store. I wanted something made by my own hands, the way everything between us had been made, slowly, deliberately, imperfectly, but real. I shaped the wood into a simple band. No gemstones, no metal. Just polished grain and warmth, sanded smooth with care and 100 thoughts of her. The next day I asked Micah if he wanted to help. He looked at me with wide eyes. Like, propose. "Yeah," I said, trying not to let my voice shake. "But simple. Just us. Just real." He grinned. "I've got ideas." We waited until Friday night. Naomi had had a long day with customer calls and a small shipping disaster. She came home tired, her hair pulled back, wearing my old flannel shirt over leggings, and she still looked like everything I ever wanted to come home to. We ordered pizza, set up a movie in the backyard with a projector, and watched as Micah pretended not to be in on it. Halfway through the movie, he accidentally tripped the projector cord and everything went dark. Naomi turned to me, laughing. "What kind of operation are you two running?" And that's when I stood up, took the small wooden ring from my pocket, got down on one knee on the grass under a sky that looked exactly the way I felt, wide open and full of stars. "Naomi," I said, voice soft but certain. "I don't have a perfect plan. I don't have all the answers. But I know this, every part of me that felt lost before stopped wandering the moment I met you." She blinked, stunned. I continued. "You didn't just let me in. You let me grow. And I want to keep growing with you for as long as you'll let me." I held up the ring. "Will you marry me? No fancy speeches. Just this. Us." There was a long pause. the kind that holds a lifetime inside it. Naomi's eyes welled up. She didn't nod. She dropped to her knees in the grass with me, took the ring, slipped it on, and whispered, "I've never been more sure of anything." Micah whooped behind us. Finally. And in that moment, surrounded by string lights, leftover pizza, and the quiet joy of something earned, not given, Naomi kissed me like she had waited her whole life for this kind of love. Simple, steady, true. They say weddings should be big, grand, drenched in white, and glitter and guest lists. Ours wasn't. We got married under the same tree where Micah once chased butterflies during that first picnic. There were no pews, no planners, no overpriced florals, just a circle of our closest friends, some folding chairs and wildflowers Micah had helped pick that morning from a field down the road. Naomi wore a soft ivory dress that flowed like wind and memory. I wore the same shirt I'd worn on our second dinner together, the one she said brought out my eyes, even though it had a tiny hole in the sleeve. Micah walked her down the aisle. He was 12 now, taller, still thoughtful, still carrying pieces of both of us in his quiet ways. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, he whispered loudly to the crowd, "If you do, I'll fight you." Laughter, tears. We wrote our own vows. Naomi's voice cracked when she said, "You never tried to fix me. You just held space for me to heal." I told her, "You didn't save me. You showed me I could save myself and still be loved in the process." We kissed under the branches while petals fell like gentle confetti. It wasn't perfect. It was ours. The house is bigger now. Not fancy, just enough room for an extra bedroom, a bigger porch, and a small fenced garden where Naomi grows lavender and tomatoes. Micah is in high school. He has longer legs, a deeper voice, and a guitar that he strums late into the night. He still calls me Dad. He doesn't hesitate anymore when he says it. And there's a new addition. Her name is Lila June Walker, and she's 3 years old with Naomi's eyes and my stubborn refusal to nap. On Sunday mornings, she climbs into our bed before the sun is up, whispering, "Daddy, wake up." Mommy made pancakes, and we do. We get up. We make coffee. We laugh when Lila puts syrup in Micah's hair on purpose. Naomi still makes candles her store now ships nationwide. I still build furniture. My shelves are in more homes than I ever thought possible. But what matters most hasn't changed. Every night when the kids are asleep, Naomi and I sit on the back porch. Same mugs, same quiet. She rests her head on my shoulder and says, "You're still here." And I answer every time there's nowhere else I'd rather be. Because love didn't end at the wedding. It grew. And we're still writing it every day with soft hands, open hearts, and the kind of faith that only time can prove true. So what do we make of this story? Some say love has no age limits when the heart is honest. Others argue there's a line and stepping over it only leads to trouble. Was Naomi bold for opening her heart again, or reckless for trusting someone so much younger? Was Eli mature beyond his years, or just caught up in the fantasy of being wanted? Here's the truth. Sometimes real connection doesn't follow rules. Sometimes it finds you when you're rebuilding a fence with the wrong tool and offers you the kind of love that heals more than just your heart. But what do you think? Is this the kind of relationship that can truly last? Or a beautiful moment that should have stayed just that, a moment? Follow me so I'll have the motivation to create more stories like this. Or encourage me by pressing the number 1. Let's talk about it in the comments below.